Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flow Over Fear podcast, where it is our mission to help you to rise above fear and realize your ultimate potential in leadership and life. I'm your host, Adam Hill, and it is my goal to share with you the human side of high performance. My guests share their experience with fear, anxiety, struggle, challenge, and most importantly, despite all of it, how they rose above it to achieve incredible results. So, if you're ready to rise up, let's get started. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Flow Over Fear and this recap episode where I'm going to share the nuggets of wisdom that I learned from Phil Lashley in the interview I just had with him earlier this week. And this was a great interview. He is a motion designer who helps thought leaders and influencers and people like that to put their ideas and frameworks into motion and designs them in that way. But he doesn't just do it for people. And this is the amazing thing. He guides people through the process. He helps bring out their imagination so that what's in the heads of the thought leader can come to life. And that's a powerful thing. And he does it using his frame method, which I'll share in a bit. But the fact that he works so closely really distinguishes him from companies like Upwork or Fiverr, which are great in their own regard to help help people put their ideas into some kind of picture. But to actually work closely and evoke the feelings, the expression, the aesthetic, and the message that you want to come out in your message, that's a skill, that's a talent that Phil has really tapped into in his years and years of experience in creating these stories and visual depictions and motion designs for all of these frameworks. And his clients speak very highly of that as well. You can find him at phillashley.com. And look at some of his work there and learn some more about him and how he can help you. But we got into a great conversation generally about imagination, and it was far reaching. We talked about imagination, creativity, how we express ourselves, and even traveling the world and how we jump from places of unfulfillment into areas of passion. And Phil grew up in Barbados, and he grew up at a young age without TV, and this was really one of the ways in which he was able to tap into his imagination early on, because he didn't really have much of a choice. He said, with things like his Hot Wheels cars or toy soldiers or things like that, and without the benefit of a television in his early years, he had to tap into his imagination. And that's where he found this open and infinite world that was around for him. And he was very creative from a very early age. And while when he got into high school, he found a career fair that opened up this world to him. He was always fascinated once he did finally get a TV. He was fascinated by commercials and how they kind of spread their message. And from that, he at a career fair, he found that, that there was a college that was looking to help people to get into commercials, and how to help design them. And that that essentially became his calling. And, one of the, that sent him down the path of really tapping into that creative energy and in college and kind of working through that and starting to take on internships and really learning where his life might want to go. And early in that process of searching, he learned that through some of his first careers, one of them being in IT, that he just wasn't fulfilled in that arena. And in reading John Maxwell's book, Keys to Success, or something along those lines, he saw this in this book that there were a lot of visual depictions of the frameworks that were being used, and he he realized, he used a lot of those frameworks in this very, very dark time in his life where he was not happy, where he was not fulfilled, where he was searching. And he would say these frameworks that he learned and what he saw. And ultimately it gave him the vision and gave him the imagination and the creativity to realize that that was his calling, was that he wanted to help thought leaders, to give back, to help thought leaders develop and visualize their frameworks and visualize what their messages were. And in a powerful way, frameworks are incredibly powerful in this world. And I can't understate the value of frameworks enough, because even when I got sober personally, it was the power of a framework that helped me to get sober, in addition to the community aspect and those kinds of things. But the framework of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous was a framework on how to do it. It really helps us to get through the how when we're struggling with what we want to get to. And so that really shaped. So the idea of helping thought leaders to create these frameworks really shaped Phil's life from there forward, as he went into Hollywood and he started to work on major Hollywood films and Super Bowl commercials and all of those sorts of things. And we got into a deeper conversation about what it meant to what really is creativity, and what is imagination, and how can we tap into our imagination? Because part of the problem for many of us as adults is, once we get into the career world, or once we get into being adults and adulting, right, we tend to let go of our imaginations as much. Or our imaginations, even worse, become our worst enemy. For a lot of us, and this is in the Stoic philosophy, there's the idea that the worst suffering that exists in our minds and in our imaginations. And that is a tragic reality of human beings when we start our young lives using our imaginations for play, for good, for joy, for anti-anxiety, so to speak. But as we get older, that imagination starts to turn against us a bit in a lot of ways. Phil never really let go of that imagination and creativity. And ultimately, it's a theory of mine that creativity is one of the best defenses against negative anxiety that exists in our lives, is when we can get creative. And that actually becomes part of Phil's daily practice that he mentioned, which is he schedules creativity into his life every day. And he schedules that imagination time into his life, so that after he prays, after he sits in quiet, he allows his imagination to run, and he gives himself permission to be creative. And there are a few prompts that we could do this, because a lot of times in our lives, when we're thinking about, we have a lot of mental blocks when it comes to imagination. Not to understate the aforementioned idea that we as adults tend to let go of imagination. Also, that we just don't give ourselves permission to do that, and we don't know where to start. A lot of times, as adults, we operate with certain rules in mind, and we want to have rules for how we imagine or how we get creative. But really, there are no rules to that. There's no rules to how we can become imaginative. For Phil, it was just leaning back in a chair and looking up at the ceiling and imagining if the world was upside down. And that's a prompt that you could use, is if you look up at the ceiling as you're listening to this, or in any time, and if you're not if you're driving, but if you look up at the ceiling and you imagine it was upside down, or you think of a color and you start to look for colors in the world, or you think of a substance like wood or metal and you start to look for that in the world, and you just start letting your imagination fly using those prompts. That's a way to get your imagination going in a new direction. Now, of course, negative imagination gets into our mind. We suffer a lot in our imagination. And for that, and I second this that Phil said, which is that therapy is a good way to get through that, is to, hire a therapist, work with a therapist if things are feeling dark, because this comes down to a theme, again, that comes up in this show over and over and over again. So as far as how we get over fear is we could do that through community or mentorship or just talking to another person. And that can come from therapy. In his own life, Phil and his wife went through therapy and found it very helpful because they were proactive about, just seeing other couples within the midst of COVID struggling. And so they got therapy of their own. So there was powerful messages in that. And a lot of times what prevents us from being creative too is fear. When we're feeling a sense of and the fear that we feel in that sense is not necessarily coming up with the ideas. The ideas as they exist in our mind might not necessarily evoke fear. In fact, that's a creative process and probably helps us to elevate above fear. When we're creatively solving problems, we're helping ourselves to rise above fear. But where we get afraid, where we often get embarrassed a lot of times, or where we might, be reluctant, is expressing that creativity. Because we're afraid of being embarrassed. We're afraid of putting that pen to paper, or putting that paintbrush to the canvas, or putting that idea out onto the table. Because what if it's perceived as dumb? We have that fear of judgment. And that fear of judgment always exists in a lot of us. It exists here in me as I say these words into a microphone that's going to go out into a podcast. It's a wonder of what are people going to think of me as I put out this content. But alas, it helps us to rise above fear, to express that creativity, to put ourselves out there, create courageously, to push ourselves just 5% beyond our comfort zone, not swan dive over it, but just put ourselves 5% beyond that comfort zone so that we can learn from and grow and experience the joy of that. So that's where, and Phil used his creativity to ask the question, to get curious in his life, and say, what if he used motion design to help people, who were thought leaders? And that's what started down his path on helping thought leaders. And the way that he approaches that is incredible in terms of how he helps people to build their thing. It's through the frame framework. It's called FRAME, FRAME. And that starts with feeling. What feeling do those leaders want to project? And then what relatable concepts do they want to employ? What relatable things do they are related to the message that they want to share? What is the aesthetic that they want to use? And what is the message that they want to share? And how do they want to express it? How can they express it? What other ways? And this is how Phil is able to draw out from his clients that imagination. And ultimately, it helps them to focus on not getting attention necessarily, but becoming unforgettable. So ultimately, as leaders and as thought leaders and as people in general, when we're chasing attention, well, a lot of times it could be negative attention, positive attention, but it may not be healthy to chase that attention, and it may cause a lot of fear and anxiety in our lives. But when we're focused on being unforgettable in a positive way, in a meaningful way, well, then we're elevating ourselves to value, to service, and that's what Phil helps draw out of us. And today he runs that company to help people to navigate the Frame network, to build their own frameworks around their intellectual property. And he travels the world with his family to just as something that they've wanted to do once they had a little bit more time freedom and lifestyle freedom. Now they're able to travel the world and live in different parts of the world 1 month at a time while continuing to build their business. And that was another element of rising above fear that
Phil had went through, which was leaving stuff in storage, going on the road, going to a new place, and learning new cultures as they went. But it became part of their lifestyle, and that's what they do now. It's a really great episode. I really highly suggest you give it a listen. So find it on Apple Podcasts. Go to the episode, listen to it, give it a nice review, and check out Phil at phillashley.com. Download his free tools on the frame method. And if you're developing a framework for your thought leadership, and engage with him and see how he can help, because he can help you to not only just design a framework, but build something that really pops and shapes the message that you want to deliver to the world in a powerful way. Thanks for listening to this episode. We'll see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Flow Over Fear podcast. If you'd like to learn more about getting into flow and learn the foundations of flow, I have a free video series on my website at www.adamcliffordhill.com called The Foundations of Flow. Feel free to go there and download it and start your journey to rising above fear and achieving greater flow in your life. And if you like this episode, and I'm guessing you did if you stuck around for this long, then please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, and you will receive notifications when I have new interviews, new recaps, and new trainings that pop up on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us.